Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today we are going to talk the pros and cons of a Harley Davidson motorcycle, specifically a bagger like this one that has a full fairing and storage bags, or saddlebags they call them. I am currently on a 2019 Harley RoadGlide Special that was mocked up to be a CVO replica. If you don't know Harleys or motorcycles, none of that is important. But for a motorcycle like this, first we will start with point number one, which is the motor or the engine. This is a Milwaukee 8 114 engine. This bike has 98 horsepower and 125 foot-pounds of torque. It is made and built to comfortably and safely move two riders with relative ease. There's a lot of torque in the motor. So you are not going to be bending any twisties at hundreds of miles an hour, and you're not going to be going mind-blowing speeds. But this bike has no problem accelerating up to the speed that it does need to get to. A lot of your smaller bikes are going to have less horsepower, like your Yamaha R6 or the Honda 3 or 400. Smaller bikes like that, the MT-07. So there are bikes that have more horsepower than this one and less torque. So when you put a passenger on them, they do not accelerate as well. The second point for a bigger bike like this with a fairing and bags is going to be the fairing. A fairing is basically the windshield and the plastic covering in front of me. It does several things. One, it has storage, so I have these little bitty cubbies right here. Two, I have gauges and my infotainment screen. And then it also blocks the wind for me when the weather is hot or when it's cold. It keeps the wind off of me from hitting me directly, so the wind will go up and over the screen and around the fairing. On the warmer days, I can open the vents. There's vents in the fairing. So up top there's a vent right here, and then I have two vents along the sides of the handlebars that you may not be able to see. I can open those from the bike, from being on the bike in motion, which is very nice. The fairings also store my speakers in the front of the bike, so I can listen to music, which is one of my favorite things about having a bigger bike like this. I don't have to cram headphones into my helmet, and I don't have to buy little Bluetooth speakers or hardwire something up. That just isn't going to have the sound quality that I'm looking for. So I absolutely love this fairing for protecting me from the wind, storing all my stuff, and also giving me gauges for accurate bike analytics. Or I can run the navigation or the music selection. I can change all that while I'm riding on the bike. I do not have to reach for the screen on this bike. I can control all that from my handlebars. If you see, I have several controls on each side of the handlebars. The horn, the brights, voice navigation, cruise control, the settings for the infotainment system, my Apple CarPlay that I have. And on the right side, I have my engine start-stop, my yield, and the controls to navigate the infotainment center. The second point, which I previously touched on, is when you have a bike like this with speakers, is audio. Not having to cram headphones into your helmet and have earaches, and the music doesn't get that loud unless you buy really nice in-helmet earbuds, third-party things like a Sena, like a Cardo, like headsets that can go in your helmet, specifically made for helmets. So this bike gets extremely loud. I have two speakers in the front, two speakers in the back, and they're not even towards the top of the performance of speakers, and they are insanely loud and very clear. So these are aftermarket speakers, but they're like middle of the road, which was good enough for me. So I really enjoy my music. I love riding to music. And people are always like, you listen to your music so loud for attention. I don't. If the roads were completely empty, I would ride the same. Loud. When I'm in a residential area like this, my music is not quite as loud. But if I'm on the interstate, or if I'm on the country roads, or the houses are not close together or to the road, my music is a booming, I assure you. I did not buy this bike for anybody else but myself. If I do get some attention from other people, like if I'm at a gas station or out in traffic, people say, hey, that's a nice bike, all the time. That's great. That's not what I did this for. This is the bike that I wanted. I listen to the music that I like. Absolutely love it. The third pro of a bike like this is the braking system. I have Brembo brakes on this bike that have one purpose, which is to help me safely stop. So I have a caliper in the back, and I have dual calipers in the front with large rotors. So that means lots of stopping power. Yes, this bike is super heavy. It's nearly 1,000 pounds, but it stops really, really well. And it also has ABS, which is a safety feature. So if I pull the brakes as hard as I can with that front brake lever, and I push in the rear lever, the rear brake, my bike will not skid and go out of control. It will safely stop. The fourth point for a bike like this, for a big Harley or any type of full fairing bike, is going to be storage. I have ample storage on this bike. I do not need a backpack to carry a good amount of items. I can simply put it in these cubbies, and I also have storage in my saddlebags. You can also put a trunk on these bikes. I can access both saddlebags from sitting on the bike. So the lever's on the inside of this saddlebag and it lifts out. So you can access it while you're at a stop or while you're riding. And there's tons of space in there. I keep several items of gear with me. I keep a med kit, I keep a tool pack, I keep at least 2 jackets. And I have 2 sets of gloves, and I still have room for more stuff. In the front, in these 2 cubbies, I have 2 sets of glasses, clears and sunglasses. I have a charger for my phone, the freak mount that holds my phone on the gas tank magnetically. So there's tons of storage on this bike. When I go out to eat, to restaurants, or go to the store, I can easily fit stuff in the saddlebags. I plan on getting a trunk for this bike called the Razorback. I'll throw a picture of it in the video somewhere so you can see what a Razorback looks like, but it's basically just a trunk for the bike and added storage space. And I think you get a little bit of style points as well. The next point for the pros is going to be lighting. With this being a very big bike, there's a lot of room for lights. So in the back, I have my tail lights, and they light up the bike pretty brightly. I also have underglow. I'm not sure if you can see it right now, but it's green and purple for the Harley theme. My headlights are super, super bright, and I had to angle them down so they didn't blind people. Another positive point for a bike like this is, since it's meant for touring and traveling long distances, it is very, very comfortable. The seat I have on here is very plush, and it is wide, and it's good for long distances. Right now it's currently 50 degrees. I also have a heated seat, so my butt is warm right now. You can also get heated grips for things like this. You can get those on any motorcycle, but it just goes with this one really well. I do not have heated grips, but that is something that I will get in the future. Another positive point is going to be the passenger comfort. This is not a sport bike. It's not a crotch rocket. It's not a chopper. There's plenty of room for a passenger to sit comfortably. And their seat is plush. It's connected to mine. It's one piece. It is also heated. I have 2 switches. So one allows me to heat the front, one allows me to heat the back. And I can toggle them both on for both seats at the same time, a high and a low setting. For Harley Davidsons specifically, there is a ton of aftermarket support if you want to customize a bike. I'm sure other bikes have a really good market for customization, but Harley Davidson specifically has a great aftermarket support. Next, we're going to talk about the cons of having a bike like this, a big dresser, a touring bike, a bagger, a cruiser, the Harley Davidson RoadGlide, which is what you see before me. We had touched on several pros to a bike like this, but there were a few that I forgot to mention. One of those being the distance that you can ride without having to fill up your gas tank. This is roughly a 6-gallon gas tank, and I can get a few hundred miles per tank as opposed to smaller bikes with smaller tanks that have to stop more frequently, which is good for longer distance ridings or just convenience of city riding, because you can fill up and ride for several days, if not 2 weeks, depending on how much you ride, before you need to fill up again, which is great. When I would go on larger rides in bigger groups for longer distances, having a Sportster with a 2.5 gallon tank roughly, I had to stop a lot more frequently than most of the group that had bigger bikes. Another positive point is going to be riding position, which kind of goes with comfort. I am in a upright position. My feet are just a bit in front of me. My arms are just below shoulder height. It's a very comfortable position to ride in, as opposed to a sport bike where you may be hunched over the gas tank, over the front wheel, in a racing position with your feet tucked underneath you and your chest closer to your knees. Riding a long distance in that position can get taxing on your body. And then you get stiff and your wrists start to ache. Is it something you can get used to? Yes, I believe it could be. This is very, very easy to get used to, this position that I'm in, nearly recliner position if my feet were any higher. So very, very comfortable. So now we will touch on some of the negatives of having a bike like this. One of the cons is going to be how the bike cools itself. This is not a state-of-the-art motorcycle. There are others that may do a better job, but this is air-cooled. There are fins on the engine, if you can see there. The wind goes over those using surface area to help keep the motor cooled. There are some bikes that have oil-cooled or water-cooled motors. So when you're in stop-and-go traffic, the bike is less likely to overheat. Speaking of stop-and-go traffic is the clutch. Your bike may or may not have a heavier clutch, but this one in stop-and-go traffic, not that that's what this is, your hand activating the clutch can get quite tired. So that's something that you need to account for. There are bikes that have much lighter clutches, beginner bikes for sure, but when you get into your performance bikes, then that's going to probably be a different issue. So the clutch lever and how difficult it is to pull in to activate. Another negative to a bike like this is going to be maintenance and repairs. When a bike has more moving parts, more mechanical components, more electronics, there's a higher probability of something going wrong on the bike. So I have several gauges: speed, tach, battery, gas. I also have my Apple CarPlay through my infotainment system. I also have my speakers. It's just more things that can go wrong with a bike. The simpler something is, the less likely it's going to need repairs. One of the biggest cons of a bike like this, unintended, is going to be the size and the weight of the bike. This is a very, very big bike. It is nearly 1,000 pounds with fluids, over 1,000 pounds with a rider. Definitely more when you have two riders, as opposed to your sport bikes and other smaller bikes that are going to be a fraction of the weight. My 1200 Harley Sportster was about half the weight of this bike. Your crotch rockets or your super sports are gonna weigh a few hundred pounds, several hundred, nowhere near 1,000. So those bikes are going to have the advantage of power to weight ratio, which is why this needs such a big motor to move it efficiently. Another con of a bike like this is going to be the ground clearance and the lean angle. Meaning, ground clearance is how high the bike sits off the ground when you're going over objects like speed bumps or down curbs or over large sticks, potholes. This bike is lower to the ground. With that, it makes it easier to flat foot when you're at a stoplight, and it makes it easier to back up when you need to back up, because this bike does not have a reverse. With a lower ground clearance comes reduced lean angle due to the bags. The bags on my bike are stretched, meaning they are longer than other bags that go on these types of bikes. It is a styling thing, not so much function, because I think you only get a few more inches of space. But with that, my bike does not lean as far, so you're not going to be taking turns with a knee down and drag an elbow. This is not a race bike. So you just got to be mindful when you're taking turns at low speeds You can scrape the bags or the floorboards. Next, I'm going to talk about who this bike may be for. And I touched on it previously, but it's going to be those riders that enjoy longer rides, value comfort, don't want to stop at the gas station every less than 100 miles. This bike is going to be for people who desire storage space to carry items, so they don't have to use a backpack or other equipment to carry things. There's a ton of storage on this bike. This bike may also be more tailored to people who do not care about high speeds and racing. This bike, the speed limit on this bike is 120, and that's just on the speedometer, so I'm sure it doesn't go quite that fast. Where your sport bikes, your Yamaha R6, your Suzuki's, Aprilas, Ducatis, those bikes are going to be well over 120 miles an hour, if not 200. This bike's also going to be for people who want to ride more on the streets than in urban areas, like off-roading or dirt biking, because you're going to want an enduro or a dirt bike for something like that. I won't say this bike is going to break your bank, but I would say that for a bike like this, you're going to want to have some sort of financial stability or the acceptance of just making bad financial decisions. Not a lot of people I know have 30 grand to drop on a motorcycle, and that's okay. My first bike was $4,500, and it lasted me several years without any issues. And the only reason I sold it is because I wanted a bigger bike. The last point I'll touch on for who this bike may be suited for is going to be those with the income to support another vehicle. So if you're going to buy your bike cash, or if you're going to finance your bike, you're either going to have to drop several $1,000s at one time, or you'll have to pay a few $100s a month, and that's just for the bike. The other added costs of riding a motorcycle are going to be a helmet, a jacket, gloves, boots if you want boots, the added fuel, which is going to be cheaper than a car, and then insurance if you decide to insure your motorcycle. So there are added costs to a motorcycle in general, but a bigger bike like this is going to be a larger entry point, a higher entry point, just because of the expense. These Harleys can get quite expensive, up to the 50s of thousands of dollars. Sport bikes can be the same, but again, if you get anything used or damaged or salvaged, it's going to be cheaper. So you can do the same with a Harley. That's just not the route that I took. I do not have an ounce of regret, but it is nice not having a car payment or a vehicle payment, so I do miss that. For the last section of this video, I will talk about who this bike may not be for, and I'll start off with traffic. So if you're in a congested area where there is a ton of traffic, stop and go, 4 lanes all backed up, and bikes are lane splitting, situations like that, this bike is not going to be for you. This bike can be very difficult to lane split because of how wide it is. I have a big fairing, I have big bars, I have bags in the back. So this bike is not going to lane split very well. Also, with stop and go traffic, the clutch is going to get heavy and the bike is going to get hot. So traffic is a big one. The next reason this bike may not be for you is if you are desiring a more agile bike, meaning a lighter bike, easier to flick, easier to stand up if it drops, easier to wheelie. This bike is, again, very, very big. Another reason this bike may not be suited for you is if you desire a bike smaller scale, a bike that's only a few 100 pounds, maybe lower to the ground, a shorter wheelbase. Again, this is going to be one of the bigger bikes on the road in this weight class. Another reason this bike may not be for you or a bike like this is going to be cost, as I touched on earlier. You can get an older Harley or one that has a lot of miles or one that's been dropped, things like that, for cheaper, yes. But a newer, up-to-date bike of this size and caliber is going to cost you quite a bit. I can put some brand new bike prices for the 2025 year in the screen here just for some comparison, but 2025 is going to cost you significantly more for a Harley than most smaller bikes unless you're getting into like the super sports. More reasons this bike may not be for you, and one like this is if you desire less cargo space. I have 2 saddlebags on this bike. I have cubbies in the front, and you can also get a trunk for this bike. You may not need all of that or want all of that, and the money could be spent elsewhere, which leads me into my next point, which is technology. You may not care about digital dashes or Apple CarPlay or GPS navigation or Bluetooth. You may just want a tachometer and a speedometer. So you may not care about all the fancy electronics that bikes come with. The last point I would touch on for why this bike may not be for you, or this style of bike, is going to be if you desire to go fast. If you want to be on a track, drag a knee. Can you wheelie this bike? Yes, but not this one. If you want to go very fast and flick turns, this is probably not going to be the bike for you. The lean angle isn't there, the acceleration, the horsepower, the motor just isn't there. So those are the pros and cons. As always, I appreciate you guys tapping into the channel. So if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. Peace out.